So it's Wednesday. It's been a week in the United States in 2021. So why wouldn't we be talking about gun control today? Unfortunately, we've had several very terrible things happen. And of course, every time a terrible thing happens, we immediately have to have the same conversation over and over again. This show is called Not Playing Politics because I don't want to play that same game. We're going to talk about gun control, but we're going to really talk about it. We're going to have a real conversation, not the conversation everyone's having on either the left or the right. I'm Alexander Keaton. I've got my Rio here, Nick Bradshaw. Nick, this has been a hard. It's been a hard week.
Yeah,
people have been hurt. I mean, this is not something to be lied about.
Yeah, I mean, the short of it is there is no, in my opinion, there is no one size fits all solution. There is no anything before. We all just need to take a moment and stop. And whether it's to pray, whether it's to meditate, whether it's to help, whether it's to do whatever, I think it's crucially important that we realize that, and it's why we were talking in pre-production about tonight's show being kind of a bit deeper, maybe even a bit darker, because we're going to get into some of the things. It's not just the statistics. Statistics are things that have happened. We're trying to talk about a topic that you're trying to predict how to prevent things in the future from happening. And that, I don't care if you're the strongest intelligence officer in the history of, the United States military, or you're, somebody who is walking down the street on a Thursday afternoon. You are hurting when you see these things. You are building up your capabilities to support others as they're going through it. And whether that's through prayer and petition, or through support, or through actions that you feel driven because of those convictions, it's just a shame. And I think the second part, just to dive right into it, I think the second part that frustrates so many of us is that it's not in the news 5 seconds before it's just, here's who to blame, here's why they're terrible, give us more control, you don't have the authority to make these decisions for yourself. And I'm interested to see what goes on tonight. I'm interested to see our comment section and everybody coming aboard. I want to welcome a Celty one. There he is, showing up, numero uno. So thank you so much for tuning in. I don't know. I don't know that there's a solution we're going to maybe necessarily uncover for the whole country tonight, but maybe we can at least get some ideas that, like you said, are a little different than what we're the standard, boilerplate language we seem to always get.
Yeah, and let's actually just sort of address the boilerplate language just to get past it, so we don't have to keep rehashing it. We can actually move on. On the left, they're going to sit there and always say, see, this is why we got to take away guns. And they'll say, no, we're not really going to take away your guns, but they want to take away the guns. They've already said it. They just lie about what they really want, because they've already publicly said, I mean, again, it was, what's his face? The guy on the skateboard, Beto, who's like, hell yeah, I'm going to take your AR-15. I don't think he knows what a gun is, but whatever. So we've been through this. We know the score, right? Something bad happens. That's got to be. It's like, so we got to take away guns. We know that's going to be the thing, and we know they're going to lie about it. They're going to say, well, all these mass shooters are angry white males. That's a lie. And let's be honest. You want to look at the stats. The NRA is going to give you the stats. Go listen to Crowder today. He did a great thing on actually breaking this down. Long story short is, they want to paint it a particular way. Right now, all white people are evil, so every shooter is white. And the way they get these numbers is to say people from the Middle East count as white people, and certain Hispanic groups count as white people for these numbers. Now, they don't count as white people in other statistics, but they do here. Why do they go for 4 people versus 3 people? Well, because if you include 3 people, then you include an awful lot of gangland shootings and gang violence, and then that becomes a completely different stat. So the simple fact of the matter is, we know that on the left, it's going to be, this is why we need more rules. We know this is why we have to have more regulations, more laws. We got to take everybody. This is the standard boilerplate for them, right? On the And we know they're going to lie about the statistics because they don't want the statistics out there, because it's a disingenuous argument to begin with. But we'll come back to that point. On the right, we're going to hear, hey, like what I just said, your statistics are entirely manufactured. They are not an honest reading of the numbers. They omit things like times guns are used to prevent harm, which on the low end is over 800,000. On the higher end, and probably the closer number, is over 2 million. And of those 2 million, the vast majority of those, the gun's never even discharged. It's simply present in the hands of the victim to prevent further harm.
So again, lots of statistics out there. In pre-production, we were talking about just to our friends out there tonight. So glad to see all of you guys. I know a lot of you have made sacrifices. It's just now hitting me for someone who, again, has worked in and around the media side of things. It's funny because Wednesday is like the night and Thursday for television production. And so for a lot of you out there that are making the sacrifices, and a lot of you that are choosing to come in on the show tonight, thank you so much. It really does mean a lot to us. As we've said, we want to build this from a grassroots perspective, and you guys are the ways that we do it. Thank you so much for tuning in. Look, again, when we were talking in pre-production, we said we were going to get into it. We were going to just gloves off. Let's have a real conversation. Let's get into it. Statistics, again, are a demonstration of what's already happened. A lot of people out there already know this, but just so we have a baseline here. When you hear things like 30,000 gun deaths are happening every year, that's tragic. And it's no less tragic that 2/3 of those are suicides. But what government regulation in particular is going to stop somebody from committing suicide if they want to commit suicide? Having been in education, and I'll be mindful of how I word this, I've worked in education, and I've been in situations where students attempted and committed suicide. And I can tell you, we were proactive with regard to the school counselor, fellow teachers, child protective services, everything. And what happened? They did it anyway. That was a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old with a will. How are you going to stop a 40-year-old with a handgun or whatever that may be? So number one, I'm not dismissing the pain and the loss that comes with suicide. I'm saying what government regulation or executive order is going to stop that? I hereby outlaw depression and suicide attempts. Cool. While you're at it, let's outlaw obesity, addiction to sugar, McDonald's drive-thrus, and PG-13 movies with too many explosions and nudity. I mean, the problem, I think,
fundamentally, my weekend.
The problem fundamentally comes down to, and I don't want to jump too far ahead, but this is the baseline I'm going to work from all night tonight. I want everyone to know that. My course of action in this tonight is going to be, I don't believe that massive government overlay is the process to solve any of these problems. I believe most problems can be solved at the state level. I believe that many problems should be solved at the community level. And I think it's critical that we empower the family, and that be a church family or community family, and a family of members, to be where most of that solution takes place. Now, I want to come back real quickly to say, from the statistics side, 2/3 of those gun deaths are coming from suicides. So when you hear things like there are 30,000 gun deaths, America has a fixation with guns. No, I think, again, bigger point tonight, I think people have a fixation with personal safety. And if you don't believe that the government is capable of providing you with that safety, it's all the more likely to take that responsibility on. We spoke in pre-production about, the steps that have been taken. And I want to kick it back to you real quickly, Alex, because I don't want to just get on a diatribe here. But when you remove capabilities of people to protect themselves and then implement laws that make it impossible for them to take proactive steps for themselves, at some point the string snaps. Now I want to go real quickly to what Michael Stroud said, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. But Michael said earlier, any type of executive action here would go through SCOTUS. So we're thinking that even if they try to pull, because you're seeing Jen Psaki, the press secretary, and the president talk about, they're not going to put that off the table yet. You got to be really careful there. You've got to be really careful, because right now what we're doing, as we say on this show every week, words have meaning and you have to define them. Can anybody tell me what an assault rifle is?
All right, hold on. Let me get my let me put my stupid hat on here for a second. um, an AR-15 would be an assault rifle because AR stands for assault. Duh. So
No,
it's any weapon that shoots bullets, like a lot of them, and they look scary.
so we get rid of the AR-15, which is one of the most popular hunting rifles in America, to the tune of what, 20 to 30 million in the country potentially. Let's say you get rid of that rifle. All I think you're going to do is push people to other weapons. And I don't think that they're going to go to weapons that are progressively weaker. Some might just get a smaller weapon. They'll step down from a 45 to a 9mm. But okay, so now you now have magazines that hold only 10 rounds. Okay, well now I'm going to have 15 magazines. I think this fundamentally comes down to the concept of who do you believe has the responsibility of providing for your personal safety. And if it is you, you will take the means, measures, and opportunity to protect yourself.
Well,
if you believe it's the government, you better be willing to wait, because you can see what response times are. And I'm very proud of our police forces. And I very much support them. And I know the shoestring budget that they're working on. And then you provide a concept like, let's defund the police. Let's reduce prison sentences for what's been going on, and then take means and methods of preventing people from protecting themselves. What did they say? 30,000 gun deaths a year? How many numbers have they been provided with showing how many times weapons have positively been used to stop crimes? The low numbers, I think earlier you were reflecting that they were in the neighborhood of 800,000 to as many as 2 million a year, that prevent abusive spouses, that prevent child abuse, that prevent rape, murder, carjackings, drug deals, whatever. I'm sorry, the numbers are just not factually on the side of those who want to restrict guns. I'm not even taking this from the position of being a gun owner or not being a gun owner. That's irrelevant. I'm not even disclosing that publicly. I will not state on this show whether I am a gun owner or not. What I will state is that if you statistically and mathematically look at it, the numbers are just not there.
Well, so let's go back to again, one of the reasons we want to go through all of the boilerplate stuff that I think Crowder has done a great job of today. Ben Shapiro did a great job of it today. Everyone's going to do a great job today of going over the statistics, right? They're going to talk about that. I want to take one more step here, because you've hit the nail on the head, but I want to drive even further into this rabbit hole, which is this. You said it's about whether or not we trust the government. If you don't trust the government to protect you, you want guns. If you do, you probably don't. And you've already briefly discussed why trusting the government for your protection is a terrible idea. But let me take this one step further. As we've said, I think this is probably something we're going to say very often, because there's always someone new listening. There's three groups of people in any position, right? You have the thought leaders who know what's actually going on, and they're the ones who determine it. They're usually the leaders, but they aren't always the leaders. They're, as far as publicly, but they're the ones who actually guide the thought. They know what's actually happening. You have often true believers. These are the influencers. These are people who they do what they're told, and they probably do genuinely believe what they're being told, but they're not actually thinking about it. They're just yay team. Then you have the majority of the people in that particular group. They're not really true believers, but for whatever reason, whatever attachment they have to a particular position or idea, they just say, okay, look, if that's what the party line is, I'll stick with this. This is my tribe on this topic, whatever. The first two, you're not going to be able to dissuade. The third group, if you can get them to think about it, you usually can. But this is for all things, right? The problem is, as you have very, very cleverly put and very succinctly stated, is, do you trust the government for your protection, yes or no? I'm going to go out and say, again, just the thought leaders. I think there's plenty of people who genuinely think that gun control will save lives. I'm not doubting that there are true believers in that. It's not even their sincerity that I care about. I'm done caring about people's sincerity and or whether or not they care about things. Like, I'm just going to work with the assumption that everyone has happy, joy feelings, right? For everyone. Great. I don't care about your feelings. I care about whether or not your plan is going to get people killed or injured, and this will. So let me ask this question of the thought leaders. The thought leaders know all the statistics we've just thrown out there. They know all the statistics that Crowder's used, that Ben Shapiro's used, the NRA has used. They actually know these things. They are not ignorant of the numbers. They are not ignorant of police time to a situation. None of them are ignorant of this. So the real question comes back to, why push something you know doesn't work? We have a ton of laws for gun. We already have gun control. Can we please stop saying we need gun control? We got more gun control than we should constitutionally be allowed to have. Period. In a story. That's not even debatable. We have everything that everyone has ever wanted on the books right now, and we don't prosecute. We don't go after people who try to get guns illegally. We're not even enforcing the laws that we have. So why keep making these arguments for more laws? Obviously, so we can confiscate them. That's the ultimate plan. But why? Why is that the plan? Why is the desire to remove guns from the hands of the law-abiding citizen when you know there is no plan to remove guns from the criminal? And there's nothing from those who want to remove guns from legal citizens. No one has a plan for not only removing guns from the hands of the criminals, but keeping new guns from coming in. Let me ask this. If we were to wave a magic wand and all the guns in America disappeared, except for those by the police and military, how many days would it take for every gang member and drug dealer in the country to have a weapon? A week? That's only because we got to get them in from Mexico. We know, everyone knows, this is just obvious. There is no plan to get guns out of the hands of criminals. And there's certainly no reason to keep them from coming. There's no plan to keep them from coming in, considering the Biden administration is trying to knock down the wall and make certain that everyone can sneak across with whatever they want to bring into the country. So, if we're not going to get them out of the hands of the criminals, and we're not going to keep them from coming into illegally from the country, because there's no move for that, because we want people coming across and bringing all the fentanyl and cocaine and crack and guns they can get into this country. So, if the only thing that the government and those who want more gun control, not gun control, more gun control, if all they're trying to do is get guns out of the hands of the law-abiding citizen, my question is why? What is that driving force? What is the thing that says we need to disarm law-abiding American citizens, even knowing they know it's going to lead to more death, more rapes, more kidnappings, more abuse, more pain and suffering in this nation? Why do it?
Well, I mean, it's the infinite question of cui bono, right? Who benefits?
Mm-hmm.
I think that there are an infinite amount of answers that could probably come, and there are many of them that are probably very valid. But I think at the end of the day, I'm gonna nerd out on some history here, and for some of our fans here, I think that they'll appreciate that side. I hope everyone does, of course, but there was a saying, and hold me, somebody fact check me on this. I believe it was Admiral Yamamoto who once was asked, who very famously said upon the bombing of Pearl Harbor, I believe we have awakened a sleeping giant and filled him with a terrible resolve. Yamamoto also said that the United States was inherently unique in its fact that it would never be invaded upon its own shores. And the phrase that he used, you guys may love this. Admiral Yamamoto was, of course, one of the naval masterminds of the bombing of Pearl Harbor and architects of the Japanese military posture during World War II. The next phrase he said, which I thought was so striking, is he said, "The United States shall," and I'm paraphrasing before I get lit up on the social media. He said, I think you guys wouldn't do that. The United States shall never be a nation that shall ever be invaded, because between every blade of grass, there's a gun. And as one of the most heavily armed, it also was designed originally to maintain that of the balance of power from tyranny arising among the political class, and you're seeing that now. The question I find funny is, someone once said, if you listen long enough, someone will always tell you the truth, even if they're lying to you. What's fascinating is how many times I hear politicians use the phrase, and there's in multiple stories right now. You can see it coming out. I challenge anyone here. It'll take you about 38 seconds. Look up the stories to find how many times people will say this in their stories in defense of gun control. I mean, everyone thinks we're just here to take your guns. I mean, we're not here to do that. Why do you keep saying that? If you're not here to do it, why do you keep saying it? I don't have to say, Alex, I'm going to go sell drugs or something. I don't know, whatever. Just something totally unbelievable that anyone who knows me, right? But I'm not going to sell drugs. But I'm just joking. It's a joke. Alex, it's a joke. You know I'm joking, right? It's a joke. What did Shakespeare say? Methinks ye doth protest too much.
Yep.
Basically, why are you trying to cover yourself about this 100 times? I'm also going to go to the last quote here, from Almost Famous. Isn't it funny how the truth just sounds differently? It is. I'll give Beto O'Rourke credit. The man was fantastic. I mean, he wrote the NRA's talking points for the next 10 years. But at least he had the chutzpah. I'm sure his public affairs team was literally crying in a closet after he said this, and his presidential campaign, his senatorial campaign, all of it has come to a screeching halt. But when he said, you're darn right I'm going after your rifles, or you're darn right I'm going after them. I mean, he openly talked about confiscation, openly. I don't ever want to be someone that my father loves this word. Which is also when he calls me out and says, you realize that's not a word. Well, I'm making it a word here. I don't want to catastrophize the situation, but I do want to say this. I think a lot of people have been talking about every single thing in the world that happens is a constitutional crisis, and everything in the world that happens is going to definitely lead to civil war. I don't necessarily believe either one of those. I believe that our institutions are more resilient than that, and I believe that we have no concept of what an actual civil war in this country would look like, because it's not going to just be a line drawn at the Mason-Dixon and people wearing gray and blue anymore.
Oh, I think we're already in a civil war. It's just this is fifth generational war.
What I will say right now is that if you wanted to find an element that could push people to the nth degree on this, it's not that it's guns, it's not firearms, it's the concept of responsibility of individual safety. And I challenge any of our parents out there, any of our aunts and uncles, any of our brothers or sisters to say, is there nothing you wouldn't do to protect your family? Do I think they're going to pass some law and then just civil war breaks out everywhere? No. But I do think that you start chipping away at things like individual liberty and individual responsibility for security. You're going to go from chipping to you're going to start taking the David down with a sledgehammer.
Well, I would say, like you said, I think we're already in fifth generational civil war. It's just information.
What does that mean?
Fifth generational warfare is more about controlling narratives and information to achieve the desired outcome, rather than, again, lining up on a big line and shooting at each other. But here's where we're at, right? On that concept, I want to go back to ask the same question, because I think you're making great points, and we keep getting closer. But again, it goes back to who benefits. But here's what I mean. You're right. They're not going to be able to come out and say, all right, I want all guns tomorrow. They can't do that. But they can pass laws. And it goes out to the states, and a bunch of states like Texas, like Florida, and a few others are going to look at them and go, we're not enforcing this. That's what's going to start happening. They're going to pass laws, and states are going to say, we're not funding this. We're not participating in this. We're not doing this. Because this isn't legal. There's going to be lawsuits. That's how this is going to go. So again, I go back to your question, cui bono? Who's benefiting from all this? Why go through all this? Why do something that will push? Like, if you really want, like you said, if you really do want to make this fifth generational warfare step back down to a third or fourth generation warfare where, there's actual violence. And by actual violence, I mean mass violence, not just rioting. Because rioting is violent, but it ain't warfare violent. Like, if you want to step this down from a fifth generational war to like a third generational war where, guns are involved, That is a step that you would take. So why? I go back to why. You've already asked who benefits. So I'm going to ask who benefits from a war, from a civil war in the United States? Who benefits from fracturing of this nation? Who benefits from disarming law-abiding citizens? Who's the one who benefits?
I mean, I think there could be a lot. I'm actually interested to kick this out to the peanut gallery here and see what they say.
All right, peanut gallery, you need to answer this question: who benefits? And while y'all type in your responses, I think we're going to get some good ones, right? Let me go through a quick and brief history of the firearm. And when I mean brief, I mean remarkably brief. Do you know who actually first opposed guns? I mean, we're going back 500 years to we have, the idea of a gun doesn't actually fire bullets. They're firing arrows in the first versions of them. Do you know who hated guns the most? It was
Hold on. Before you say anything, because with some of our fans here, I want to make sure that we get a chance to take a swing at the pitch here. Can you give some contextual, clues? Like, what time period, what part of the world, something? Give us something.
Okay, so England, so the continental Europe, around 500 years ago was really when guns first started being fielded. They first fired arrows, and then we started firing lead shot. Oh no! Way before that. We're talking. We're talking about just about the Renaissance and post-Renaissance.
So we're looking around the UK, and we're looking around 500 years ago, so around the 50s.
Well, the UK. I mean, we're talking. We're like the Merovingians were still around and doing things in Italy at this time, right? So we're talking about Italy. We're talking about Germany. We're talking about France, Spain, Britain. We're talking about all the old stuff.
The Pope.
People were. The Pope, absolutely. Pope was very much involved in all of this.
No. I'm saying, was the Pope the one against?
No, it was the entire aristocratic class was against guns because most of your knightly, because again, people were still wearing plate mail at this time, right? So, like, you go back to a knight, like when you watch A Knight's Tale, that's the kind of armor people were still wearing. But again, who wore them? It was the knightly class.
I'm sorry. Did you just cite A Knight's Tale as the reference?
I am just trying to make certain I have a reference point that everyone.
You know that he wore Nike, right? Because that's
I know
chronologically possible.
Yeah. Well, I don't. Again, it was what it was. So, I mean, they also had David Bowie in the soundtrack. But again, my point is, it's plate mail armor, and I know everyone's seen A Knight's Tale. So, plate mail armor is what they're wearing. So, it was the knightly class that opposed guns. Why? Because they thought it was a shame that a knight could be felled by a commoner with a gun. This is the ultimate truth of the gun. The gun, as Samuel Colt has taught us all, is the great equalizer. 500 years ago, you had knights in very expensive, heavy plate mail, and they were essentially... I would say
fabulous.
They were a fabulous plate mail armor. But they were expensive. They were the knightly class. But they were also the tanks of the day. They could ride out with their lances, and they could just hack people apart. Well, that's great, because the bulk of your military is still going to be these poor conscripted farmers that live off the land. They're your serfs. They have no real power, and they are going to fight in whatever war you want them to fight because they don't have a choice not to. Well, and so the knights, they were out there and they did their thing. But now all of a sudden someone's like, hey, we have these guns. Well, what can we do with these guns? Well, I can put them in the hands of all these dirt poor farmers, and with very minimal training, they can kill a knight. And that terrified them because now knights had no power. Because, well, for the cost of one suit of plate armor, I can field 20 or 30 or 40 commoners with guns. That is what destroyed the aristocracy, was guns. Because because if there's one thing that progressives, I think, in the critical theorists do get right, there's one tiny thing. Again, they're wrong about their interpretation of it, but they do like to focus on power structures. They're not wrong in that. The aristocrats were able to do what they did because they have power. The reason any totalitarian state can do what it does is power. The brilliance of our Second Amendment is that it really does shift the power to the people. Because, sure, the government will always be able to field more and better equipment than the masses, but their numbers are always less. At the end of the day, numbers will win. They know that they can't, you really can't outdo, again, a gun behind every blade of grass. You just can't. Because there's only so many soldiers you can have, and there's only so much power. Guns upend the nature of power in the world that they're in. Who benefits? And it's Cheese Freak who, I think, in my opinion, has it right. Right? It is the new aristocratic class. It is the elites. It's those for whom the government actually works. Because the government doesn't work for us, not the common man. I forget who it was, but it was several years ago. They did a review of the United States government. They said this is no longer a functioning republic or democracy. It's a plutocracy. And a plutocracy is basically a structure that, in modern parlance, works for itself and benefits itself. So those in the private sector who benefit from the government, they get what they want, and the government gets what it wants, but the people don't really have a real say. That's the government that we have right now. If we are armed, we pose a threat to them, and they know it. And by them, I will be very specific. Washington, D.C. That's what this is about. It's about power over individual humans. They don't care about the pain and suffering of us. They care about their power. That's who benefits. That's who quid bonos.
Well, I'm going to take a side note here. First off, just to say, what an interesting amount of explanation on that. That was really fantastic. Thank you for that, Alex. That's cool. Secondly, any show that can start off talking about gun control and end up using the phrase plutocracy is just where you want to be tonight, folks. I know there's great shows out there, but that is fantastic.
And explain it using A Knight's Tale.
There you go. Exactly. But thirdly, I do want to step aside here really quickly because you brought up a point when you said DC. Here's my concern that I have with all this. Quick side note, just to reiterate your point with regard to power. This show in many ways becomes a vent for my. I have a tiniest little libertarian leaning in me, but I think that libertarian leaning hits on some major points, and I was thinking about that earlier today actually. But it's funny how the show seems to tap into that and amplify it and bring it out. So I'll say this. You're hearing a lot about now that they want to blow up everything they said they weren't going to do. Now they're going to do. They're going to blow up the filibuster and all this. Okay. So now we've got to make DC a state. We absolutely have to make DC a state. And the response to it is from the public affairs and not public affairs. I'm sorry. From the perspective you're getting from the left is, well, this is about voting rights. It's about representation. I don't think there's a single person in the world that argues that people should have representation in votes. I have no problem with that whatsoever. So why don't we just do what happened before when land was taken and land was given back to Virginia and just let those lands be reacclimated into the country, into the states they were taken from. Now their votes are reinstituted and we don't have to change all of our flags. But I mean, that would give everybody the voting rights and exposure that they want, right? So that means the topic would go away. Or wait, maybe is it because they want to expand the number of senators and representatives? If this were purely about voting rights, that would be something that we could do. And I want to believe that we can. And I think that we can execute that by having the land returned in places from DC to Maryland and to other places where it was virtually annexed from. So let's do that. Annex may not be the appropriate legal term. Let me just simply say, there are ways for the land to be reincorporated such that everybody can have their voting rights and it doesn't involve having to redesign that perspective. But that's not what it's about. So I shift back to what we say here. It's the same thing when you made the recommendation with regards to looking at the power perspective. I had never thought about it from the perspective of drafting that far back, but that makes sense. In graduate school, we talked about a topic called epoche. I've brought this up on this show several times, and I could be absolutely butchering it because it's been a while since I was in graduate school. But the truth of it is, epoche was the concept of basically peeling back an onion and stating that certain events didn't just sporadically happen. They were driven by underlying events that could have taken place weeks, months, days, years, decades before. And the example that my professor at the time gave, a really good guy that I enjoyed working under, provided was the concept of how, at least from a graduate course that we were discussing this, I believe it was statistics, he's talked about how the Triangle Factory fire led to the current platform and ideological perspectives of the Democrat Party. Not the Democrat Party of today, but the one of about 15 years ago. And I think that that's an interesting perspective. So, epoche, applying that same peeling back of the onion when we're looking at something like gun control, and it becomes when people say things like, you're being selfish as a gun owner, or the Constitution doesn't say anywhere about there being a ruling about people having guns. Well, the Supreme Court read it that way and said that it did. Heller, another law, provided those guides. There's several other gun laws out there, or Heller was in part one of the laws. So when you look at the rulings that are coming down, are you going to have to find ways to get out of those? What I'd like to do right now on this part of the conversation, if we can, Alex, is shift it a little bit maybe to the concept of what do we see coming down the pipe? Because we always like to end the show on the what can we do about it. But I think right now we've had good conversation with the foundations and maybe some background. What do we see coming down the pipe? And then as we end, we can say, what do we want to do about it?
That's a great question. I think it is, because I think the big problem here with all of this is because this is fifth generational warfare, right? There is the question of what do we do?
Every time you say that, I just picture like Transformers fighting each other.
Hold on. Now that's all I'm seeing. Libertarians, politics in disguise.
Justice in disguise.
Transform and roll out on privately funded roads.
Right.
I love that we completely derailed this with Transformers now. So here's the problem, right? We're in a world now where I would like to think the majority actually wants a real practical solution. And the problem is, all right, we said we're going to get dark. Let me get dark. I think the problem is the majority of this country actually doesn't care. They just want to go to work. They want to eat dinner. They want to turn on the TV, and they want to just live their lives. They don't care. They make plans around what, I think they live in a much more conservative to libertarian viewpoint. I think they probably would align with that, but they don't think about it. They don't care. That's the majority. It's the minorities that are fighting over this, right? Libertarians, conservatives, those who actually care on the right. And the problem is what is now on the right includes liberals from 30 years ago. Like, that's the weird thing. Like, it really is just really the left and right dichotomy no longer really, I don't know that it ever really functioned, but it's no longer functioning. It's really the difference between those who believe in classical liberalism or classical liberty and totalitarians. That's really what this fight's between. The problem is the totalitarians own outright, lock, stock, and barrel, the means of information. There's no way to really see how many people actually genuinely agree and side with us. That's sort of this. I think that's really one of the bigger problems. So in many ways, it feels like we are all out here fighting individually, and we don't see that it's going to matter because those of us who are just out here living our lives, trying to do the right thing, we can't see where we actually have any real institutional power, because on some level we really don't. So I wish I had an answer for this beyond we can make better arguments. And I think the argument, the first step is, at least on the argument side, is stop giving them the premise that this is about gun control. It's not about gun control. It's about control over us. They don't care about the fact that these people or again, it's irrelevant whether or not they care about these people, because again, they only care about people when it's convenient for them. They don't care about the fact that 15 people, the same number that was killed between these two quote unquote mass shootings, the same number of people died on a Monday in Chicago or Baltimore or any number of places. Y'all didn't care about. It's like you're caring about these mass shootings, but you didn't care about what happened in Baltimore or any of these places on a Monday or a Tuesday last week. So please stop acting like you actually care about this. It is simply the fig leaf that you're using to push an agenda.
So I'm going to push back just real quickly, if I may, just for a second. I don't think that it's people don't care. I think that it's people aren't either aware, notified, or with the onslaught of information that is so ubiquitous and present everywhere and constantly in your face, are disengaging to get away from that discomfort, and therefore they may not be tracking it directly. I don't think it's a matter of care. Now, if you're saying it's a matter of investment from the perspective of how can you look at what's going on in Chicago, where the average death count is higher than it is in like Fallujah, right? I mean, it's unbelievable. Under Lori Lightfoot's leadership, that city has just been at any time. It's just, I mean, it's old Chicago style politics, right? I mean, that's just what you're seeing there, and they've got some of the most heavily restricted gun laws in the country. And again, I'm not advocating for well, I'm advocating for anybody in this, but it's not just the perspective of a rancher who has, several shotguns, a few rifles, and a couple of pistols that, well, that guy's got too many. That's not what the argument that I'm making at all. I'm thinking about the single mother who's 26 years old, who's a nurse that has 2 kids at home, who's working the night shift and coming home at 2 a.m., walking back in Brooklyn. And what is she going to do to protect herself? Now, if that 113-pound woman walking back at 2 o'clock in the morning has a 357 in her purse, well, all of a sudden she's starting to look a little bit more tough. And that's the person that I'm thinking about. The tragedies of these 2 shootings, which I believe it was 18 people, if I recall the count, 8 and then 10. It's tragic. I don't know that you re-script the Second Amendment as it applies to 300 plus million people. But I think you certainly want to make sure that we are not, again, are we creating more language that just strips law-abiding citizens? Let's remember that the people that are committing most of the crimes are criminals. That's what makes them. Do you think they're going to stop getting guns? There are 300 million guns out there. Do you think they're going to be like, hey, there's a law now against this? I don't think that's a real thing at all.
Again, I go back to the question I asked earlier. If we had some magic magnet that got all the guns out of the hands of law-abiding citizens and criminals, everyone except the police and military, how long would it take for the guns to flood in and get back in the hands of all the gangbangers and people who wanted to use them for ill intent? How long? A week? 2 weeks? It's impossible. Getting guns in the hands of criminals is fundamentally an impossibility. There's nothing we can do.
But I think that when we look at the numbers and the facts, that, for example, the 1994 assault weapons ban, the best thing that came out of that for many people was the marketing. And I'm not trying to just be flippant when I say that. I'm saying that the phrase assault ban, assault weapons, again, we don't have a definition that we're using on that. Is it,
of course.
Is it a weapon that's scary looking? Is it a weapon that looks like this? Because guess what? When it's not the AR-15, I don't see it stopping at the AR-15. That's why they're proposing 105 different models or whatever it was that I believe Senator Feinstein brought up. Okay, so the massive impact that it had with regard to that for anything regarding shootings or mass shootings, that was negligible, I believe, at best. What they've noticed is that in cities that, I mean, look, just track the cities. Look at your more progressively red states and see what the rates are. Then compare them to blue states. I would be hard pressed to say that Chicago, New York, and LA are going to be surpassed by places like I mean, a lot of your urban cities tend to be left, but or more on the Democrat side. But I would say, do we think overall the number and even the per capita and percentage of crime committed in some place like South Carolina is really going to challenge Illinois or New York? It just isn't. I just don't believe that it is. And if the numbers are wrong, call me out. I'll go back and see it. The concern that I have is, again, who's doing it? A lot of these are also the number of cases. I don't want to use a number because I don't want to misquote it, but the amount of crime being committed vice that of a handgun versus that of a long gun, it's just not there. But it's that visceral reaction people have. They see a school shooting, which is just absolutely horrific. And then they create a no-gun zone around it. Now, I understand that feeling, but what that's doing is it's demonizing the tool. It's demonizing the instrument.
But why? Again, this really does go back to, is it, again, so we've gone around on this. Again, we've talked about this. Other people are going to talk about statistics until the cows come home and then leave again. How do we fight that? How do we? Is it just that we got to go literally person by person and make the best argument for this? Or is there something we can do institutionally? How do we do this? Because let's be honest, everyone's like, well, this is why you have to vote Republican. What the hell have Republicans done over the last 30 years that have actually worked? I don't think at this point, I don't believe the Republican Party is worth voting for anymore. They sure as the world aren't doing anything about any of this. They're not actually fighting. They're putting up a really good act. So how do we do this? How do we actually stop what is ostensibly a plan that is designed to increase crime, violent and otherwise, by 3 million victims?
Well, I think that the perspective, we talked about this a long time ago on the show. I remember one of our earlier shows, and it was the perspective of thinking that, again, I really don't want to be the guy that goes, the left does this, the right does this, but I'm just going to provide this, and I'll say one perspective does this, one perspective does this, and I'll let you fine, intelligent people very easily and very clearly determine which one I'm talking about. I would say one side favors the philosophical perspective that if you outlaw the tool or the instrument, you'll get rid of the generator. If you get rid of guns, you'll get rid of crime. If you kick people out of jail, they won't be criminals anymore. The other side, I think, looks after the ideology or the philosophy behind it. Why would someone advocate for there being more guns? Well, if you don't look at a gun as if you look at a gun as an instrument that takes on the morality, if you will, of its user, then if it goes to a good person, then the gun is simply an instrument of defense, hunting, target shooting, competition, whatever it can be. Fine. But if you look at weapons as a means of criminality, then if someone has a gun, it's bad. So if we can just get rid of the guns, we'll get rid of the bad people and we'll get rid of the crime. You once said years ago, Alex, I remember this. Again, I don't want to just make it us and them. I'll say one side, and you used to say they believe in crime, just not criminals.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a very poignant point. And now that we've entered the age where the conversation has gone to the point that we're now looking at things, at least right now, almost exclusively through the lens of race, so much so that you've now got Democrat senators saying they're going to hold up support in the Senate for their own party's nominations if they're not racially based.
Yep.
Amy Duckworth, who was a former service member, came out and openly said, and she and Senator Mazie Hirono out of Hawaii, their perspectives on what they're going to do and how the Biden administration has broken its promise with regard to representation of Asian Americans. Again, we have literally reduced people to one identity. Someone made a comment the other day. Who was it? I don't recall. This is not my thought. I don't deserve credit on it. But the way that they said it, they said,
I won't give you any. It's okay.
Give it 5 years, and Martin Luther King will be canceled.
Oh, I don't think it's even 5 years. I think it's literally around the corner.
it's just, I come back to that on the show more than I think that's probably been the single point I've come back to on the show, probably more than any other point, or certainly one of them, which is I love, this is going to be the most obvious statement in the world. I love my family, guys. I really do. And for those of you out there that are either a part of it, or those of you that are tangential to it, or loving friends, I love my family. And we've got all types of backgrounds, whether it's of Hispanic descent, whether it's of Moroccan descent, whether it's of Indian descent, whether it's Hindu, Muslim, Catholic, whatever. When I see the opportunities lost in our culture when we want to break everything down along racial lines, I've said it to many people before, and I'll say it again. Me being a 40-something middle-class white guy are probably the three most boring elements about who I am. I'm not saying I'm Neil Armstrong. I'm not saying I'm Elvis Presley. I'm just saying of the elements of people that know me, those are probably three of the least interesting parts of who I am. And when I see the joy that it brings my family, and probably your family, guys, I'm willing to bet to our fans out there, my family's not unique in that. I always tease and say when we have dinner, it looks like a meeting of the UN. I mean, it's probably your family. That is the American family. But I think a lot of us say, yeah, that's the American family. Cool. Want to go get a taco? Want to go play basketball? Like, we don't just harp on it and go, well, we need to talk about cousin Victoria. I mean, if we just don't talk about this ad nauseum oh my gosh. And I'm telling you, I think that these same ad hominem attacks, these personal attacks, these straw man arguments, they're all going to come up. The Second Amendment is going to become racist. The concept of voting for individual rights for this is going to be racist. And it's because you know why? Good men and women have done nothing, and cynicism has been allowed to fester to the point that now people realize it's not about racism, it's about power, and it's about being able to point it. I'm not undermining the fact that I believe that there are people in the world that are very, very racist, and there are very racist belief structures out there. That's not what I'm standing against. What I'm standing against is the concept that they have found a rhetorical tactic used to subvert to get what they want. That's not good faith. And what did Wonder Woman tell us? Anything born of lies, it can't be good. Exactly. Now, I didn't say that just because Gal Gadot is my girlfriend, as many of you on the show already know. Please don't fact check that. It would break my father's heart. But what I'm saying is that we're in a perspective right now that I feel like if we don't get back to actually having the topics that we talked about, we talked about this earlier in pre-production, and I'm going to put this out there, and this is very hard. I heard somebody use a line once. It may have been a gun rights group. I don't recall, but I heard it, and it was powerful. And it said, adding a gun to the situation is simply there in the seconds that you need it, when you realize that help is minutes away. I don't have a specific number in mind, guys, when I say this, but the tragic loss of 18 people, which is nothing more than a tragedy, full stop. There is no going forward from that. It is a tragedy. Those convicted should be held accountable to the highest form of the law and punitive measure, period. But I don't believe that we step back and say, due to these 18 lost lives, 300 million Americans should have their constitutional rights stripped. I just don't believe that. And I never will. I think it certainly offers us an opportunity, and maybe we shift here, Alex, to the last 5 minutes or so of what are some tangible things. And guys, we're looking at you. What are some things we can do? Because I'm telling you, what I've noticed the habit is it a joke? Someone once said that the greatest salesman, the greatest representative for the NRA, or the greatest gun salesman in the world is a Democrat in the White House?
Yep.
I just think gun sales are going to go through the roof. They've been going through the roof for the last 2 years. I think all I think these movements do when you go so way over the top and try to strip things of these massive levels is you're going to push people farther and farther into their little clans.
Well, I don't think that that's not the plan. Maybe that is. Again, we go back to cui bono, who benefits. Why make some of these decisions? Why do this? When again, the thought leaders know what's happening. They're not blind. They're not stupid. They know. So why? I think the thing is so I think they're doing it because they know what it'll do. I think it's the chaos that they want. I think, and you know what? Maybe I'm giving some thought, not all of them, but some of these thought leaders too much credit. Maybe they're just corrupt. Maybe they're just being paid off by people who would really like money to be flowing from, say, certain countries that would benefit from our being destroyed. Maybe. And maybe it's irrelevant. The real question is how do we fight this? And I think we need to stop accepting the premise of these arguments. Tell people, yes, we already have gun laws. We have all kinds of gun laws. None of that's not the problem. The problem isn't gun laws. It's not even the fact that we aren't enforcing these gun laws. We're not putting these people away. It's that they know it won't work. This is not about guns. It's about control. Again, the same people who don't want there to be a border wall and don't want us to have guns are the same people who built walls around themselves and through people with guns at American citizens. That's what this is about. This is about control. It is nothing. None of these people actually care about us. They certainly don't give a damn about these people who died, or they would have cared about all the people who died. But they don't. They don't get teary-eyed when, unfortunately, I can't remember her name because I'm thinking of one specific girl. She was killed because her mom pulled into the wrong Wendy's during last summer. Right? I don't recall them crying over her. We cry whenever it's a bunch of white kids who get shot at a school, but we certainly don't even bother to mention the 15 black kids who got blown away on a random Tuesday in Chicago or Detroit or any of it. Why? Because they don't actually care. It's not about us. It's not about our protection. They want these laws enforced to control us, to make certain that we don't pose a threat to them. None of this has anything to do with us protecting ourselves. None of it has anything to do with hunting. I would just say maybe we got to do this person to person, like Jehovah's Witnesses. It's like, good morning, ma'am. Has someone talked to you about guns and gun policy? Like maybe that's what we need to start doing, handing out little booklets with like guns with guns on them and explaining the gospel of the gun and why guns are important and why those who want to restrict them are evil. Or maybe the bigger problem here isn't even that. Maybe the real thing we need to be fighting for is a return to true federalism, where the federal government does not get to say on our gun laws. Maybe Texas gets to have its own gun laws. Oklahoma gets to have their own gun laws. Wisconsin can have their own gun laws. Chicago can have their own. Maybe we need to get back to the point where the federal government can't do anything about guns. It needs to be individual states, individual communities determining what is and is not right for their community. Maybe it needs to get back to the people.
Sorry, Alex, I'm hopping real quickly. So in many ways, that is the case. And unfortunately, an example to prove that was the story of the young Marine. If you guys out there listening want to get a chance, Google the story about the young Marine who drove with a weapon in his trunk. And by crossing state lines, I believe into New Jersey, he was made a criminal. So the argument to that, you're talking about things like reciprocity, where states recognize when it comes to something like a concealed weapon, you can carry across state lines and be mindful of that. Look, I'm all a fan of the 10th Amendment. I'm all a fan of the concept of reciprocity. I'm all a fan of federalism, where the states hold those powers. I'm not here to be a history professor. I'm saying you bring up a very good point, and I want to align with it, that there are ways to do it. But the problem that we're running into is that this hodgepodge is back and forth. Yes, states need to have those. I agree with you on that fully. I also think we need to create some type of understanding, so that when a young Marine who's fully trained in the weapon system brings a pistol for a gun range or whatever it is in the trunk of his car, he's not waving it out the window, shooting it, is in the trunk of his car, and you cross a state line. He didn't cross a state line into Uganda. He crossed the state line. He didn't cross the state line into Brussels. He crossed the state line. I believe it was into New Jersey. And when he was pulled over, it became this obviously much bigger situation. I feel perfectly at peace that a young Marine of healthy mind, body, and spirit having a weapon. I hop in there just for that 2 seconds to say I'm with you completely with regard to states holding a lot more of that authority, but we also need to make sure that they're being accounted for, because the authorities that are held, there needs to be a little bit more of the smoothing of the icing on top of the cake. Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, I like that. I like that.
Now I want a cake. I think I'm just hungry.
Exactly. Well, and that's the thing, right? It goes back to, it would be easier to do that if certain states weren't relying on the federal government as their cover, right? I think the problem is the more power we've put in Washington, which is what we've done, we've incentivized Washington basically to run everything, and that's the problem. We need to be able to break these things back to the states. And yeah, you know what? Maybe things are bad, where, like you said, someone can have a gun in their car. They go from one state to the next state. In one state you're legal, the other state you're criminal. That sounds like a terrible thing, but is it more terrible than having a federal government that can look at you and say, "Great, nobody gets guns anymore"? Or, I mean, I think these are bigger problems, and we're coming back to the fact that really, who benefits from all this? It's Washington D.C. Washington D.C. is who is benefiting from our chaos, from our pain, our suffering, our opioid condition, situations, our unemployment. It is this centralized power in and about Washington D.C. and the people who run it. They are the ones who benefit. If you want to get corruption, first of all, you can't ever get corruption out of politics, but the easiest way to get a lot of it out is remove the power. Everyone's trying to figure out, I think the big problem here in all of this, and maybe this is a conversation for another day, but I think this may be the biggest problem we need to overhaul on everyone, right? Is that we're looking on both sides. Everyone's trying to figure out what is the solution, what is the system that we can create that is perfect, that doesn't do what I think is bad. We're looking to create a system, and the problem is there is no incorruptible system. There is only systems run by people. If the people are corrupt, if the people are immoral, if the people don't value rights, then none of it matters. You're never going to fix that. This ultimately only comes down to, we have to have a moral people. We have to be able to encourage people to actually care about morality. Right now, we don't. As a nation, as a culture, we just don't. And that's why corrupt and evil people are running everything. And we centralize the power with the corrupt, with the evil, and we wonder why they do even worse corrupt and evil things. You are feeding the fire. The only way to stop this is to remove the oxygen, remove the power. That's what we got to do.
Yeah, I as we close down here tonight, guys, thank you all for being a part. I want to try something new. Actually, Alex doesn't even know I'm going to pull this on him. This is an oral Hershiser, if you will, at the last moment. I'm going to go ahead and see, Alex, how you feel about this. I'm just kind of looking over some of our comments tonight. And, as much as we engage you guys in real time, we don't always necessarily get to see every single comment as they come in. So just scrolling down, I'm going to kind of do a pass, as we're a more private and personal show. We have grown our numbers. We went from 34 to 36 followers. Take that, YouTube. We appreciate you guys getting the message out. We appreciate you guys sharing and welcoming people to the community and to the team. It's a little bit of a, I wouldn't use the word ministry, but it's certainly something that we do of heart, and we care about it. So, Alex, I'm going to just kind of shoot down the list here. Just want to welcome and say thank you to you guys. I see some old familiar names. I want to thank a salty one for charging in and beating us all to the starting line. That was great. our dear friend Susan here, who I saw her right at the bottom. Susan may be the only one on this page that has the confidence to say this, and I appreciate that confidence. So I'm going to share it. Susan, I hope you don't mind. You put it on the internet, so I think you're open to it. But Susan is not. I mentioned wanting to get some dessert and some cake, and she was the one to call me out and say, "Please don't mention cake." You know what? I have definitely put my COVID-19 on, so I can tell you that if you may have called out the cake side, I do want you to know, if I can share this with everybody, I think it's wonderful that you actually have quit smoking. And I came from two parents that were smokers, and I can tell you that that is a heck of an achievement. My mother smoked for the enjoyment of smoking. Anyone who knew Miss Linda would know that she loved her cigarette and her cap. She used to say she was a flight attendant. Mom's in heaven now, but she used to say she'd wake up and have the flight attendant's breakfast. She'd have her caffeine and nicotine. She'd have her cup of coffee and a cigarette. And I wanted to call you out on that because I think that's fantastic. Congratulations. That is an incredible achievement. Keep it up. We all support you, teammate. I want to thank our buddy Steve. He came in. I know Steve was a little bit late. I know Steve is off doing great things for the country, and I want to thank him and be grateful for what he's done. Our old buddy Ginger Snap, who's I still think that's one of the best names I've ever seen on the internet ever. It's absolutely fantastic. Our buddy Mike Stroud raised a lot of good points. We weren't able to get to all of them, but I think that there's some great questions you guys are asking with regard to the legality of what's going on, what to watch going through the court system, and what we're doing. And Alex, don't let me keep you. I know you have another show potentially coming up. I want to also.
No, I just have to go back to work after this. But yeah, no, that is something we can come again. We can come back to this. I think there's aspects of all this that we can hit on the minutia. But I wanted the first real conversation to really about the subject.
It is.
Yeah, to be more about what is the broader context here.
Well, and I think. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, no. That's why it's like, yeah, no. We're definitely going to come back to this topic and see what else is developing. We may even have to talk about this next week some more, and we can get more into some of the minutiae because there's always going to be these little things. But again, it goes back to the question that we want to ask and that y'all can definitely hit us back up with is how do we fight this? What I have said this for a long time. I'm not about protests. I don't think protesting is really the way to go. That being said, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong about this. Maybe that is what we need to do. Maybe I
think your presence in your representative office and in your school council meetings, especially school board meetings, I think those are the ways that you go about getting these things changed. Absolutely. And forgive me for jumping in on that, Alex, but I'm with you on this and I support it. I'm not saying I'm Abby Hoffman over here, but I am saying that we are in a place where, I like or respect what they're, like or agree with anything that they're doing. I don't. But I respect the fact that those loudest on the left know how to present themselves to be, an immovable object when it comes to getting things done. I'm not all about occupying, and I'm certainly not about trapping people or violating the law. But I think that there's power in numbers, and if you show up to a school board meeting, if you show up to a city council meeting, if you show up to that, go for it, guys. We talk about action all the time. Let's do it. Let's absolutely do it. I do want to wrap real quickly, Alex, on some of the people. I see A. Brunson's been here, an older fan who's been here from the beginning, and we appreciate all of you guys, or from early parts of the show. Again, thank you all. There was a newer name that I don't recognize as easily. Forgive me if you have participated more, but I do want to welcome. If we haven't, we'd like to welcome all of you. I do see that we have a fan that's newer to me. I want to thank Lamp of Light. I appreciate your engagement here and sharing your thoughts with all of us. We hope that you will return and bring 10 or 12,000 followers with you. That's cool. But at the end, guys, what is most important about this? And Alex, we may want to come back to this. I think this is a topic that we really want to kick out. I think this is a topic that we want to invite somebody to come and maybe join the show. And guys, you're seeing production in real time. So Alex and I will have this talk offline, and we'll get back to you. Would you guys real quickly, as we tuck in for the night here, could you guys give us a thumbs up, thumbs down if you might be interested in wanting to join this topic or one of our other topics? If we'll give you a minute here to respond. If you could just give us a thumbs up, thumbs down if you'd be interested in participating potentially. No pressure. But just and as we've said, as we've heard many times, raising your hand does not mean volunteering. Alex, anything you want to wrap on?
No, I think that's it for now. I mean, we'll be back here next week, same bat time, same bat channel, and we're going to keep doing this. I think we are going to discover, because we're not here to entertain. We'd like to be entertaining, don't get me wrong, but we're here to figure out how to really move forward. We don't want to play politics. We want to actually do politics. And as we've said, that involves get involved with your local politics. And yes, at this point, the Republican Party is the only thing we have at the moment. But I think we can fix it. But you've got to be a part of the party. You've got to be a part of. You've actually got to know who your mayor is, who your town councils are. You got to be involved on the micro level to have an effect on the macro level. But we're going to figure this out. We're going to create a plan. We're going to find ways to make this country better, to actually fix it, because we can no longer sit back and believe that those that we've entrusted power to are going to use it correctly. We got to take the power back to us, the people. And we do it by getting off our butts and getting out there and doing it ourselves. But we're going to figure this out. We're going to be here next week to help y'all do it. For Nick and myself, we appreciate all of y'all. We will catch y'all next time.
Ciao.